Hey, I'm Caleb from YouCanMakeThisToo. Thank you for joining me. Please forgive my voice this video. It's cold season, but you're here for the project, which I had a lot of fun making. This is my first industrial style welded furniture piece, which I've appreciated for quite a while, but honestly I've always been kind of intimidated to try. But once I got into this project some, I realized it'd been really silly to be intimidated to try something like this. So let me show you how you can make this too.
One of these days I might have a project that starts differently, but once again, this one started with breaking down material. But this time is a bit different because it's steel. I took my first trip to my local steel yard and was surprised how much more affordable steel is there compared to big box stores. I'll have the prices listed in the article on my website for those interested. There's a link below, and anything I mention, there will be a link below. If you've not been around, you know I'm not a big fan of angle grinders, but I've been hooked on these new steel cutting blades for circular saws. So I rigged up this little jig to make it super easy to make straight cuts on all of this steel with my circular saw. I've got a quick video on my Instagram showing how I made it if you're interested. But I was short-sighted. I forgot that a lot of these pieces actually need to be mitered. I could have made a new jig or modified mine, but instead I decided to just get over my angle grinder hesitation. And I also learned from my last project and made sure to remove the mill scale from where I'll be welding. Later I'll talk more about what I learned about grinder discs. Last autumn, I picked up this Lincoln Electric 210 MP during a sale, and I'm glad I did. As a novice welder, this has made the setup process just super easy. I just choose the right options, and I know what those are based on what I'm using, hook up the cables the way it tells me to, and the machine is ready to go. But if one of these automatic style machines isn't an option for you, there are simple tables that give you a start point for all the settings to look them up. And I welded nearly this entire project on the default settings that it gave me for my material. Where I deviated, I'll talk about. And now for the fun stuff, to start welding. I verified each corner was square before tack welding it, and as a rule of thumb, welding on concrete is a very bad idea. But I don't have a proper welding table, so the floor was my best option for laying out something this large to get it tacked together, and just a few tacks aren't going to put enough heat into the concrete to cause an issue. Once it was stacked together, I moved the assembly up to my improvised welding table and finished welding each seam. Before this project, my trigger time with MIG welding could be counted in minutes. But I was actually able to get what I think are some pretty good welds. Now, I contribute that fact to some coaching from friends and having a nice machine. Welding may seem like an intimidating subject, but it's really not. The only thing to be wary of is how addicting it is. No joke, during this project, I actually had some dreams about welding. I still spent more time grinding my welds than welding, so that was disappointing, but yeah. The top and bottom frames are identical for this, so I used some magnets to hold the second frame in position, identical to the first so they'd be the same, and tacked it together. Then I separated the two and finished welding the seams. I was fortunate in that while I was doing this project we had some really nice weather and I was able to keep the door open and use a fan to keep the air changing. Welding fumes are pretty nasty, so having a fume extractor or good ventilation are a must. I really don't want to do this in an enclosed space. With the frames done, I added the four corners, which are 2-inch angle. Almost entirely the rest of this build will be 1.5-inch angle. They were welded onto the outside of the frames. I used a 12-inch speed square to get them aligned while I put tacks on the corners, and then welded the seams. Then I did it 3 more times. To add the other frame to the uprights, I cut some spacers from plywood for each corner. This will make sure in the end I have a pretty square cube shape. I used some F-clamps to hold the uprights tight to the frame as I tack them in place. For the frame to upright connection, I'm only welding the seams that'll be hidden. I had cut the uprights a bit long, so once everything was welded, I came back and grinded it smooth. Now I start working on the end that'll have the shelves. First is the bottom shelf. I mark a piece of angle in place and then cut it to length. I want it to sit flush with the bottom frame below, so I remove the bottom side of the angle iron from each end. When I start to weld it in place, you'll see how that makes sense. And you'll see me repeat these steps I'm about to do a lot during this build. Cut a piece, mark where it goes, grind the mill scale from where it'll be welded, clamp a spacer block into place, clamp the piece to be welded, tack the piece into place, remove the clamps and wood so the wood doesn't catch on fire, weld the seams, and then grind the welds. The top shelf will be made from 1-inch angle. I made this kind of like the frames. I marked the pieces in place and used magnets to align the top shelf with the bottom shelf. That made getting the dimensions for the short pieces easy and made sure that when I tacked it together, the top shelf would be the same as the bottom. Once it was tacked up, I welded the seams. Now that the basic frame of the island is together, I'm able to use it as an improvised welding table. Then time to clean. You'll notice my flap disc isn't really working well anymore to remove the mill scale. I'm going to talk some more about that later. And now for the spacer, clamping, welding sequence again. I'm using the magnets to hold the top shelf in place, but it is important to note that these magnets can't be trusted to be square, but they work great at holding things in place if you get them square. So I use a different square to make sure my pieces are square before welding. I'm marking out some 1.5-inch angle to be uprights for the back of the shelves. These will get notched to fit over the top and bottom frame and not interfere with the weld. But I want to talk about the new disc in my angle grinder. Normal cutoff wheels are what I don't like about grinders. They seem flimsy, they can explode in your face, and they get smaller as they wear, so your depth of cut is always decreasing as you use it. So when I ran out, I opted to get one of these diamond cutting discs. It's not near as frail as the typical ones and is supposed to last a lot longer. They do cost about 10 times your normal cutoff, but the lifespan is supposed to offset the cost. Now I don't know about that yet, but I am a lot more comfortable using this one, and it seems to cut a lot faster too. Once they were notched out properly, I could drop these right into place. The uprights register against the shelves, so I didn't need any spacer blocks here. I just clamp them snug, zip some tack welds into place, and weld the seams. Again, on all of these uprights, I'm not welding the outside seam where the upright overlaps the frames, which is just for aesthetic reasons. I check the notches for the uprights on the other end to make sure the piece has enough clearance to get into place. These will frame out the other end where the drawer will be, though a sliding basket may be a better description. The spacers are sized to set these the same distance as the other side is set in, so that way the piece looks balanced. I'm thinking about doing a sort of woodworker's intro to welding video, so if that's something you'd like, please let me know below. There's also a great opportunity to learn about welding, woodworking, content creation, and making professionally this April. It's an event called Spring Make Show, and I'll be giving a class there, and there will be crash courses for different areas as well. It's in Cleveland, Ohio, and if you use the code HARRIS, you'll get $100 off your ticket. There's more information on that in the description if you're interested.
So I was just working on grinding off all the meal scale with a regular flap disc and having a really hard time. I talked to my buddy and he said flap disc, that the meal scale is kind of gummy, so it gums them up and it doesn't work well. So I got one of these quick strip discs on his advice, Richard from 42 Fab. I have a link below. He's a good dude, really great at metalworking and world of difference. So if you're trying to clean off meal scale, definitely get one of these. Don't try to grind it. It just doesn't work.
This is the bottom of the drawer basket thing. It's all 1-inch angle. The magnets are holding it in place, but I did use a different square to make sure it is actually square before tacking it together. I don't want to catch my plywood on fire, so once I get it tacked, I move over to the frame to finish welding it together and grind my welds down. With the base done, I start adding uprights. These go on top of the base instead of overlapping it.
So in welding these, I learned something interesting. What I'm trying to do is do 2 tacks and then a 3rd tack to hold everything and weld the line. But when I do the tacks, the metal contracts, and so even though I hold it square, what I've been doing is pulling things out of square. So for this to end up square, I actually need to figure out how much to offset it to the inside away from where I'm going to be welding. So when the weld cools, it ends up straight or square where I want it to be basically instead of where the metal wants to pull it to. Hope that makes sense. So I don't exactly know how to solve this. I'm just working at it. If you know how, please leave a comment, let me know, let everyone else know. And if you're new to welding like me, something to keep in mind. So if your stuff seems square, then it's not square. This is probably why.
After I welded the uprights as upright as I could, I added the top rail to the basket. This is just 1-inch bar stock, and putting it together is more of the same. Magnets help hold things together as I tack and then weld it together. One thing to note is I measured these pieces to match the span at the bottom of the basket, not the top. That way, if my uprights aren't perfectly square, hopefully these pieces are going to help pull them closer into position.
Been working on this box. It's going to be a drawer to go in here, pull in and out on some slides for cookie sheets, pizza pans, stuff like that there's no good place to store. But the front angle and the back angle, this is 2 inches, this is 1.5. So if I just try to put my slide on there, it'd be angled, and that's just not going to work. I need it to be straight. So I'm taking a piece of scrap and cut this to match, and then I can weld this on the back, and once it's cut, it'll fit, so that way I can weld my strut in between, and that'll give me a parallel surface to weld my drawer slide onto, so that way my box will slide right.
The middle section is going to have some pull-out shelves, so now I'm adding some brackets that the drawer slides can be mounted to. I use spacer blocks and install some close to the bottom and some upper level ones. Then I start welding the drawer slides. This is one of the times I wavered from the default settings on the welder. These slides are much thinner metal, so I drop the voltage to the bottom of the green area on the welder to reduce the amount of heat, and I do the same to my wire feed speed because I want relatively small tacks here. These are just going to be tack welded. I figured that any more of that would distort the slides. I do the same thing for the slides for the end basket, except I just hold them in place to tack them. I drill some holes through the top to screw the butcher block down. I used a center punch to keep my bit from wandering, drilled a pilot hole, and then used a step bit to open it up. The holes need to be a bit oversized from the screws in order to allow the wood to move through the seasons. The last thing to get welded on are the casters. These are just some lockable casters I picked up from Amazon. Earlier, after I told you about the quick strip discs, I removed the mill scale from everything. So the only paint prep left is to wipe everything down with alcohol to remove any grease and grinding dust. The frame will get boxed in with expanded metal. This stuff cut really easy with my diamond cutoff wheel, and I just used an old piece of foam board to keep it off the ground while I cut it. Welding over paint is no good, so before I can add the expanded metal, I sand off some spots where I can tack weld it to the frame. I wanted the expanded metal to stay natural though, so that's why I painted the frame before adding the expanded metal. All that's left is the woodwork for the shelves and butcher top. First, I mill everything flat. I have a video I'll link below that details my process for that. But basically, it's just making the wood flat and square, because when you buy it, it's not. The shelves are just construction grade pine, but they're not wide enough for my shelves, so I glue them together into panels. To give the shelves some flair, I'm trying a technique that my buddy Jonny Builds is awesome at, stained Shou Sugi bond. Now, I'm not going to get into the purpose and details because I'll probably do a separate video on that later, but I'm just doing this for aesthetics. Basically, you burn the wood, then brush and sand it, and add stain. I opted for red for a pop of color to give some interest to this piece. After the stain cures, I screw the shelves into the drawer slides, and then everything gets a couple coats of clear enamel. This will seal the shelves, and it's also going to seal the expanded metal so it doesn't rust because I did leave it raw. The top is solid hard maple laminated together. This is the second and last glue up to get the full width of the top. After the glue dries, I trim the ends square and cut it to length. Then off camera, I sand it down before rubbing in several coats of butcher block conditioner, which is just a blend of mineral oil and waxes. Then off camera, I run screws through the holes in the top of the frame and into the top to hold it all together. And that's all, folks. Thank you for watching, and you know the deal. Please consider subscribing if this is your first time watching, and if you really enjoyed this, please like it. Add a comment about anything you particularly liked or didn't like or would like to see in the future. If you want to support the channel, there are options in the description box below to purchase plans, merch, Patreon, affiliate links, and the like. But until next time, make time to make something.